Welcome back to our Next Gen STEM program. This week we have a research software engineer from Seattle, Washington, and she works at Vulcan Inc., where her work specifically focuses on saving endangered animals and preserving ocean health. So everyone, welcome and meet our new innovator, Gracie Ermi.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. What interested you in computer science?
Yeah, so I really love computer science because I feel like it really is able to combine my interest in like logic and kind of like systematic thinking, but also creativity. I really love being creative and getting to come up with solutions to challenging problems and stuff. And so I feel like I get to combine both of those things that I love into one cool field of computer science.
Awesome. So what was your college experience like in being introduced to computer science? Is that what you originally started out in your educational career?
Yeah, so I actually didn't know what computer science even was until I got to college. I thought maybe I wanted to major in math or physics or some kind of sciencey STEM thing, but I didn't know what coding even looked like. Like I'd never seen a line of code. I had never written a line of code. So I had no idea what kind of skills you needed for that major or anything. So, but once I did get to college, I kind of had to take a computer science class for this program that I was in. And I was super intimidated. I was really scared that I was going to be super bad at it, just because I thought you had to be someone who like loved video games and like tinkered with computers to be someone who was good at coding. But that's not true at all. You don't have to, you can have those interests for sure, that but you can have any other interest too, and bring that into your coding, and it just, any interest you have gives you good perspective to make you a good problem solver and innovator. So yeah, I was excited to learn that you can combine computer science with like almost anything to create a really cool career.
That's sweet. So what made you choose this particular path of animal conservation when applying your software engineer degree to your career?
Yeah, so I didn't have the intention originally to do conservation work with my software skills because I didn't know you could do that. So I was pleasantly surprised to find the job that I have now. And when I started working at Vulcan, I didn't even know what I was going to be working on. And Vulcan does kind of a wide range of different, applying technology to different social good causes. And conservation is just one of those things. And so I knew I was interested in applying technology to solve problems that I cared about and hopefully help people and help the planet somehow. But then I kind of just fell into the conservation realm, and I'm so excited to be here now because I really love what I get to do. So yeah.
Awesome. And so in your job, do you work by yourself or are you working with a team?
Great question. Yeah, this was something I was personally very concerned about when I entered the field, because we've all seen the stereotypes of programmers like alone in the basement, just like hacking away. And I was worried that was going to be what my job was like, but I was pleasantly surprised to find out that I work with a team all the time. I'm constantly collaborating with people, and we're working together to solve problems and help each other out. And everyone I work with is just like so smart and nice and helpful and supportive. And so I think that there's a lot of stereotypes around what people in technology maybe are like, but I've definitely been surrounded by really good people and helpful people, and I've been so lucky to get to work with all of them.
Awesome. And then what other STEM disciplines make up your team, or is everyone generally in the software engineering realm?
There are a ton of different types of experts on my team. So for instance, if you did the workbook and you read a little bit about the ORCA work that I get to do, that team alone, there's a lot of technologists, but even within technology, there's all different kinds of specialties. So some people on the team are experts at like building tools that someone is gonna like, that a scientist will use. And whereas I do like machine learning, which is kind of more on like the back end that a user won't actually see. They'll use that part that I'm building, but they won't be interacting directly with that part. And then there's like user experience people who do a lot of talking to the people that we're trying to build technology for and trying to figure out what their problems are and how we could best address those problems that they're having. And then there are people who are not on the technology side, they're on like the, you know, conservation side, and they're experts in animals and how we can better protect the planet. And so yeah, there's a huge range of people that I get to work with. Yeah.
Awesome. And then in the world of, as a software engineer in a career, what other pathways can people take that are interested in this? We see that you work with animal conservation. What are other ways people can use this science?
Yeah, there's so many different ways you can apply computer science and be a software engineer. There are like a lot of use cases where we're trying to build technology for like healthcare systems, which can help a ton of people. There are people working in like security, you know, because we have to make sure that when we're all using all of this technology that we aren't being unsafe, and like that the technology we're using is protecting the people who are using the technology. So that's a really important job. There are people who work in like the food industry. All kinds of technology is being built to try to produce food more efficiently and try to use our resources better so that we can feed everyone. So there are, yeah, pretty much any field you can think of, you could be a software engineer in that field.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Awesome. And in your field, do you spend your time updating technology or building technology?
I would say I'm more on the building technology side, which is really exciting. I'm like using ideas that other people have thought of, like for maybe a different use case, but then I'm applying it to like saving orcas or trying to help elephants. So yeah, definitely more on the building technology side.
Very fun. And in what ways, what ways can people use the technology that you build?
So often the people who are using technology that I build are scientists, wildlife scientists, and they are usually using it to help process all of the data that they have collected about the wildlife that they study. And if they're not using technology in that process already, then they're usually having to spend a lot of hours looking through all the images that they've collected of the wildlife that they study. And it can be super time consuming work and pretty tiring and boring to have to look through all these images and do whatever they need to do to the images to get the information out. And so the technology I build, they can use it to do the most boring parts of that work faster so that they can get onto the more important stuff. Because we definitely still want humans and the experts to be doing the work that's, you know, taking action and changing policies and bringing information to people who can make changes to how we're interacting with the planet and animals. Yeah, there's a lot of really important stuff that wildlife researchers do that computers cannot replace. So we're just trying to do the stuff, have the computers do the stuff that we can maybe make a little bit faster and easier for the scientists.
Awesome. And then we had talked a little bit about coding. And for those that are unfamiliar with it, could you describe coding and how does that work in your field?
Yeah. So it's not as intimidating as it sounds if you haven't interacted with or like done any coding before. It is really, you know, if you've seen like movies where there's like hacking happening, there's usually like that black screen and like green text is like streaming past and they're just typing furiously, but that's not at all what it looks like. So usually coding languages, there's actually a lot of just like English words in coding, and you're writing them in a specific way that the computer can understand. So you're having to follow like certain rules to make the words that you're typing make sense to the computer. But it's like, once you learn what's going on and like what those rules are, it tends to make a lot of sense. And it also, you go not as fast as the hackers in the movies. You definitely are typing much slower and like thinking a lot about how you're gonna write your code to have it work. And there's a lot of, you know, testing it and having it fail and then having to change things. So yeah, when people hack into systems in like 1 second, that I don't think has ever happened really. So yeah, but it's a really like, I feel like just methodical sort of process, and you get to think a lot. And I feel like a lot of people talk about like how it's almost like you go into like a weird headspace of like just being so focused, and time flies when you're coding, I feel like sometimes. So yeah, it's really fun and just like a different way to use that I had ever used my brain before in other subjects. So yeah, it's really, it's fun.
Very cool. And you had mentioned like coding is kind of like a language. We actually had an audience question from Joshua. So what language do you use when working with coding and machine learning?
Yeah, usually I use Python, coding language Python. But other people use Python's kind of popular for machine learning, but yeah, depending on what kind of technology you're building, there's all different kinds of languages. But that's another cool thing about coding, is learning a new language is not as hard as like learning a new, you know, like learning Spanish or French or some new like speaking language. So yeah, once you know how to learn a new language in coding, you can pretty easily pick up other ones, which is exciting and fun. So yeah.
And are languages used for different attributes or aspects in coding?
Yeah, there's kind of, depending on what you're trying to do, there's languages that are better at some things than others and used for different stuff. So yeah.
So what is the first software engineering project that you were proud of working on?
So probably the project I worked on when I was an intern at Vulcan. It was called the Global Finprint Project, which is still a project that's happening. They actually had a really exciting announcement recently about a milestone that they had hit. You can look up Global Finprint, they're a really cool project, but they were trying to, they have all these underwater cameras that they set up at coral reefs around the world, and they're trying to capture video of sharks and rays so that we can have a better understanding of where they live and how many sharks and rays there are around the world. And see if conservation efforts that are happening are making a difference and increasing the numbers of sharks and rays that we're seeing. And so I was on that project trying to automate how they were processing all of this video footage, because having all these cameras everywhere collects a lot of hours of video. And again, a lot of people were having to sit there and watch all this video to try to find the sharks and the rays. And a lot of the video is just like nothing is swimming past. And so it can be pretty boring to sit there and watch it. So I was trying to get machine learning working that would have the computer watch the video for you and pick out the frames where something was actually in the frame, to then have a human like double check what was going on when there was something exciting happening. So that work, I only worked on it for like 3 months as an intern. But it was really exciting at the end of the 3 months. Even though it wasn't like a finished product, I was able to show it to the team and some actual like shark researchers and have them be excited about it and be like, this would really help us do our jobs faster and easier. So that was really rewarding to get to hear that kind of feedback.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you had mentioned a little bit about machine learning. Could you describe on kind of what that process is?
Yes, yeah. So machine learning is a type of artificial intelligence, which always makes it sound like very fancy, but what even artificial intelligence is at like the heart of it is how we teach a computer to do something automatically. And right now, a lot of machine learning is just teaching computers to do the really boring stuff like I try to do with wildlife conservation stuff that I'm trying to automate. So, you know, yeah. So what we do with machine learning is we have all of this data, which is just a bunch of examples of whatever task we're trying to teach the computer to do. So in the shark example, we had all these frames of all of these videos, and a lot of the frames had sharks and a lot of them didn't have sharks. And the ones that did have sharks, we had people go through and label where the sharks were. And so we had a bunch of examples now that we can show to the computer of what a shark looks like when it's facing forward and facing to the side and up and down and like all over the place. And we show enough examples like that to a computer, and then it can start to learn the patterns that make up a shark. And so then in the future, when it sees new video footage, it can recognize sharks that it has never seen before based on the patterns that it's learned about what makes a shark a shark. So we can teach computers to do all kinds of stuff if we have enough data showing it how to do the thing we want it to do.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
So what types of machines or computers do you work with in your office?
Yeah. So it's been very nice working from home because all I really need is my laptop. So it's pretty easy to transition to working from home. But through my laptop, I can connect to all these like more powerful machines that we have located at our actual office. And I can do a lot of my work on those machines remotely through my laptop. So yeah, but I'm just using a regular old laptop, and then the machines at work are definitely more powerful than most people have like in their house regularly, but they're they're also just computers.
Very cool. So normally when you did go to the office, what did your day typically look like?
So part of my day is always filled with like a few meeting with the team and trying to figure out, what are our next steps on what are we going to try to do, and do we have any issues we need to tackle together. Part of my day is definitely spent actually coding, doing different things that I need to do for the day that way. And then I've also gotten to spend some of my time working on our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council at work, where there's a group of people from all different departments trying to work together to make sure that we're creating a workplace where everyone feels welcome and included, and just trying to make a difference there, which I think is important stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then I've also gotten to do a lot of outreach like this and getting to talk to students in the community about what I do and just share my work and my experience with people. That's become a pretty big part of my job too, which is really fun. So
very cool. Love outreach. Yeah.
Yes.
What have you learned since starting your job post college? And that could be either in computer science and or wildlife conservation.
Yeah. Well, I've learned a lot about wildlife conservation. I didn't know very much going in, so basically everything I've learned in that field has been on the job, which has been really exciting. I love having meetings with wildlife scientists because I pretty much always learn some new fun fact about animals that I didn't know before. And then in computer science, I would say the biggest thing I've learned is how important it is to talk to people about what we're building before we just decide to build something, because as a software engineer, I don't know what a wildlife scientist needs and what is, the most time-consuming part of their job that we could possibly help with. And even once we figure out, what we maybe could build, it's just so important, all along the way, to continue talking to them to figure out, to make sure that we're staying on the right path, and that what we build in the end, we're spending all this time to build something, we would definitely want it to actually work for them. So that piece has been probably the area I've learned the most in computer science. Yeah.
Yeah, collaboration is definitely key. So
yes,
that's great. So what is a key attribute in building technology? You had mentioned being creative. What are some other key ways to best build technology?
Yeah. So yeah, for sure, creativity. We have to, especially because a lot of the technology that's being built and what will be built in the future hasn't been built before, and so it's we can't just use old ideas, we have to come up with new ones. So having all different kinds of people working on coming up with those ideas is also so important, because if we have a team that all looks the same, they're not going to come up with a very wide variety of ideas, or at least not as wide as they could if the team is made up of people that are all different from each other and have all different kinds of experiences and backgrounds. So yeah, diversity is hugely important in building technology. And then just, I would say, communication for sure too, with the people that we're building for, and also with our own team, to make sure that everyone understands where we're going and what's happening, and that we're helping each other along, because we'll definitely go farther as a team than we would individually. So yeah, communication for sure.
Oh, definitely. So for our audience, those who have either already checked out our workbook or have yet to, this week we also learned about an organization called SeaLife Response, Rehab, and Research. And they're an organization up in Washington with a purpose of advancing the health and welfare of marine life in the Pacific Northwest. So Gracie, how does your company work with them specifically?
Yeah, so SR3 is the acronym for that group. They are so amazing. They're doing all kinds of really awesome research, and we specifically are working with them on the research that they're doing, or trying to support the research that they're already doing, to study the southern resident killer whales, which is a population of killer whales local to the Pacific Northwest. And these whales are specifically really struggling because they eat salmon, which is in short supply, so they tend to not be able to find enough food. And then also because of vessel noise, and all the boats around interfere with their communications, and also stress them out. Just if there's too much noise, it can be really stressful and harmful to their health. And so SR3 is looking at understanding their health better via drones. So they will fly drones out over the water and over the orcas, far enough away where they're not disturbing them at all. And they have very special permits to be able to do this. Not just anyone can take their drone out and look at the orcas. But SR3 can, and they take these amazing photos of the orcas and use the photos to study the health of the whales, and take different measurements on the photos to be able to compare their health from this year to their health from last year, and all this really interesting stuff. And so we're trying to help them look at that process that they go through right now, because again, they have thousands of photos that they take every time they go out and fly. And someone has to sit there and look at those photos and do this whole health measurement process. And so we're trying to look at which parts of that process we could teach a computer to do instead, to try to save them some time so they can do even more for the whales. Yeah, but they are such an awesome organization. We're really excited to get to work with them.
Yeah, it sounds like a really fun connection.
Yeah.
And how do you teach a computer? We kind of already talked a little bit about machine learning and training, what a shark looks like. But how do you teach a computer to recognize different orcas in the images that you collect or that you are given?
Yeah. So this has been a really exciting challenge to get to work on, because it hasn't really been done before very often, where we're trying to teach a computer to recognize individual animals. But each whale, in each killer whale, has a unique saddle patch on its back. I actually have a prop here for a visual aid. So this is the saddle patch on the back of the whale here. And this whale I knit myself, and I designed this saddle patch to emulate the saddle patch of a real whale in the southern resident killer whales, Nugget L55. She's one of the real whales, and so her saddle patch kind of looks like this, and it's unique to Nugget. And so each whale, you can, if you're an expert, you can tell which one is which via their saddle patches. And so we're trying to use that expert knowledge and the whales that they've labeled to teach a computer. So it's still a work in progress, but it's looking pretty promising that we're going to be able to teach a computer to do this, which is pretty exciting. So
awesome. That is great. Cool. So how do you find ways to be creative in your job?
Yeah. So when we're looking at a new project, or task within a larger project, like trying to recognize individual whales, because that hasn't been done before, I get a huge opportunity to be creative there. Like, I have to kind of look at what similar things other people have done in the past, but then and try to kind of put those things together into a way that will attack this new problem, and then also bring in my own new ideas about what could I change to make this really work and do well on this new task that no one has ever done before. So I think that whole piece of technology and trying to build new things, that's just so much room to be creative.
Oh yeah, it sounds like it. So what other pathways can people, you kind of already talked about a career in computer science. Are there ways that you can even dive in more with animal conservation and computer science outside of just coding?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's so many people working in the conservation world. There's people who are the actual scientists, who are the experts about the animals, and they're studying the animals and getting to learn more about the animals themselves. And there's also people who work on more of the government side and trying to make new laws and policies and regulations that will stop people from doing the things that are harming the animals. And then, yeah, conservation is such a wide world, and I feel like I'm still learning about all the possibilities there too. But yeah, I think there's also a lot of potential for travel if you're working in the conservation space, because animals live all over the place. So yeah, there's a lot you can do in conservation for sure.
Very cool. So have you noticed any ways the field of software engineering could improve so that more women and people from diverse backgrounds feel welcome, or have you experienced a pretty welcoming environment yourself?
I would say I've experienced a little bit of both. Mostly positive for sure, but there were definitely times in college, a lot of my classes were mostly guys and very few women. And there was definitely the potential there to feel very unwelcome, but I feel like what helped me be able to push through that was the community of women that I did have around me. Even though we were outnumbered, we still definitely stuck together and really encouraged each other to get through those times when it feels like it's really hard, and maybe you don't feel like this is where or you don't feel like you're good enough, or different struggles that we all face. That community that I had built was really helpful. And so I think that community doesn't have to just be women. If we want to make these spaces more welcome for everybody, we need to make sure that the community we're creating is inclusive of everybody, and that no matter what, we're just trying to support people and encourage them, and make them feel welcome. And it's not as simple as just saying you should feel welcome here. We have to make an effort and get to know people for who they are and let them bring their whole selves to work. I think that's a huge part of it too, is encouraging people to like what they like and bring what their special interests and talents are to work, and to really celebrate that, I think, is important.
Yeah, and especially because kind of what you were talking about, there was the stereotype of a computer engineer working solo, but it really is a big team and community and group. So very what problems have conservationists struggled with in the past that you or your company has had direct interaction with solving?
Yeah. So a really cool example at my company is this. I haven't worked on this product, but I am just so inspired by it. So it's called Earth Ranger, this project, and basically there are parks, national parks. A lot of the ones that we've worked with are in Africa, and different countries in Africa. And Vulcan, the team at Vulcan who's working on this, they noticed that a big issue in the parks was that rangers who were trying to protect these large, usually very large expanses of land, they were having to use a lot of like binders of paper and to keep track of different events that were happening. And like they didn't have a very easy to use system to keep track of everything that they were trying to do, and to manage such huge areas with pretty small teams. And so they built Earth Ranger, which is this like really cool map tool that just kind of takes all those binders of information that they had and puts it into an easy to use tool that and visualizes everything on a map, so they can see like their whole park and all the different things that are happening. And a lot of the parks have elephants in them, and some of the elephants have tracking collars on them, and so you can also see like where all the elephants are on the map, which is really adorable. So yeah, it's just like a really neat area where they identified a really niche problem, I feel like, and were able to solve it in a really useful way. So that's a pretty exciting project. Yeah.
And what is a significant challenge that you have had to overcome through your education or career?
Yeah. Probably the number one challenge I've had to overcome is just my own self-doubt and imposter syndrome that I felt in computer science, because I felt like I was behind all of my classmates because I was only starting to learn as a freshman in college. And also being so outnumbered and having not very many women around me made me feel like maybe this isn't the place for me and maybe I don't really belong here. But you know, that was all just in my head, I feel like. And every time I encounter that kind of thought process now too, because sometimes even now I'll be like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I don't know enough. I feel like I put a lot of pressure on myself, but that, you know, it's all just in my head, and I have to, and if anyone, you know, else experiences this, it's so important to just like take a step back from yourself and really think about like all the things you have achieved, and all the reasons why, you know, you are good enough to be wherever you are. And yeah, it's hard to to battle your own self when you're having those kinds of feelings, but you are good enough to be where you are, and so remembering that is so important.
Definitely. And that actually feeds into one of our next questions. If you can go back in time, what would you say to encourage your younger self when starting your STEM career?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably just, I mean, along those same lines, just to remember that like that I am good enough, and that like the ideas that I have are unique, and the fact that I don't see very many people who look like me around me makes my presence there even more necessary, you know, and like my ideas are useful and valuable, and like I need to just push through so that I can share them with the world. I think that's yeah, that's probably what I would tell myself.
Awesome. And then we actually have an audience question from Gail, who is wondering where you see yourself in 10 years.
Oh, that is hard. I feel like, especially in the time we're in, who knows where we'll be in 10 years. But I hope that I'm still just getting to work on stuff that I'm really passionate about, and that I feel like my work is making a difference, and that that I believe in what I'm getting to do. So that's not a very specific plan, but but I hope that's where I'll be in 10 years. Yeah.
Awesome. And then our last question, any advice or words of encouragement for our next generation of STEM innovators?
Yes, I would say just keep going, you know, even if things get hard and you feel like it's too challenging or that you can't do it. You know, that's not true at all. You can do it, and you have to keep going because the world really needs to hear your ideas and your voice. And you know, I believe in you. So if you if you get stuck and you feel like it's too hard, just remember that one random person that you heard one time that she believes in you. So keep going, and I can't wait to see what you build someday.
Awesome. I love it. Gracie, thank you so much for joining us today. And all of our audience, we do have that workbook that you can learn a little bit more about Gracie's journey in STEM, as well as the conservation work that is being done because of the technology that she's building with her team. So thank you everyone for joining. If you have more questions, we can kind of link on where to figure that out. We'll send out some info on SR3 as well as Vulcan and just the awesome work that they're doing. So thank you guys so much for joining us, and have a good rest of your week.
Yeah, thank you so much.